Okay, now the National Planning Commission today hosted a summit aimed at finding ways to improve the implementation of the National Development Plan Vision 2030. The Commission has failed to present the 10-year review of the NDP to Cabinet due to time constraints, and that was on Wednesday. But tracking this whole saga for us and this story this week is Moloko Moloto. And today he was in Midrand at this summit. Moloko, good afternoon. Welcome back. The minister, I understand, responsible for monitoring, planning and evaluation, addressed this gathering virtually today, this summit. How did she reflect on the NDP so far, especially Moloko, because we are only 7 years away to 2030?
That is very true. So there's a general acceptance that the National Development Plan has really not made headway or progress in terms of addressing the key objectives that it had set. You would recall that it had planned, for instance, to eradicate poverty by 2030. It had planned to create 11 million jobs by 2030, and to do so, it had to grow the economy by at least 5.4% annually. It hasn't done so. Even before COVID, I mean, the numbers were really nowhere near 5% in terms of the economic growth. And the commissioners, by the way, the Minister of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, Maropin Ramokgopa, who is located in the presidency, is the chairperson of the National Planning Commission, which has issued out a report publicly. It is yet to be presented before Parliament, Cabinet, as you said earlier. Now, today, they hosted what they call the National Planning Summit. They invited several planners and experts from various fields across not only the country, but also others came from other parts of the world, from the Scandinavian countries, for instance. And they were just discussing ways of trying to unlock these bottlenecks that are making it difficult to implement the National Development Plan. The Minister, Ramokgopa, was saying that, look, we need to understand that the socio-economic challenges and political challenges that are facing South Africa, historical and current situations, are unique to South Africa. Maybe let's listen to her.
Our recent assessment and review of the 10 years since the adoption of the NDP suggests that we have not succeeded in shifting the needle on the three triple challenges identified by the NDP, namely eliminating poverty and reducing inequality and unemployment. In fact, the review indicates that there has been marginal improvement across the key areas due to a myriad of objectives and subjective influences. This is precisely why today the summit is timely, because we also realize that government and business can do a lot of things that are interventions in trying to improve the lives of people. However, if they do not follow what we have put in place as the NDP, it will be difficult to then now measure if we are moving forward or not. We must ask the difficult question and match them with decisiveness. Most importantly, we must take the lessons from our experience and be willing to learn from the experiences of other countries that have been able to successfully implement long-term plans, including Germany, Namibia, and Nigeria here in Africa.
As part of this summit, I understand, Moloko Moloto, a former commissioner who was once heading up the commission, or was it was a chairperson, Joel Netshitenzhe, he was there today and he spoke, and you had a chance to chat to him?
Well, Joel Netshitenzhe indeed was once the commissioner in the National Planning Commission, but prior to that, he was head of policy. Of course, he also held, I think, a position of Director General during the presidency of Thabo Mbeki. He was essentially sharing his experience and knowledge of planning, and he was saying that one of the suggestions that was rejected even then when he was still in government, he believes the incumbent are really not willing to embrace it, is to have the clusters of government headed by the corresponding ministries. For instance, you don't have a ministry that has nothing to do with the economy, perhaps heading a a cluster of economic development and all that. He's saying that rather create the so-called senior ministries, where you know that these are the people who have the ear of the president, and when they speak, they will have the authority. Everybody else will listen to them. But he is therefore, Mr. Nesitenje, suggesting that perhaps it's about time, because the Vision 2030 is deadline is 7 years away. Perhaps it's about time that we increase this deadline by at least 5 years. Let's listen to him.
My sense, and I might be wrong in this regard, is that coordination, integration, and related advisory services, which were a core part of the policy unit's function, suffered when the NPC and the DPME were created. And so planning became more effective and was given more resources, and so was monitoring and evaluation. But coordination and integration and advisory services suffered. Kifilwe would remember that there would be no single cabinet memo that would go to cabinet without a comment from the policy unit. If there's resistance on the part of a particular department to our observations, we would then prepare notes for the political principals in the presidency to help them challenge that submission, because it might be contradictory to a decision taken 2 weeks ago by cabinet. And in my view, that weakness has led to some form of fiefdom mentality developing amongst departments.
Joel Nesitenje, a former commissioner of the National Planning Commission, sharing his views at today's one-day summit, the National Planning Summit of the NPC, with 7 years to go before the deadline of 2030. There's no ways those objectives are going to be achieved. That's as clear as daylight. Thank you very much, Moloko Moloto, for that update.